Welcome to another episode of Power Chats with Chris and Sav. Today, we've decided we're going to talk about our pasts. And I just found out today that Savannah has a similar past as me. She kind of grew up sailing on different boats and stuff like that when she was younger. I'm really interested to hear that side of her story because some know, not many actually, because I don't talk about it much. I talk more about my policing background. But I grew up my teenage years sailing around the world on a 40-foot catamaran. Started in the Caribbean, sailed all the way through, and I believe we talked a bit about this in the first episode, but sailed from the Caribbean all the way through the South Pacific, and then ended up in New Zealand because my mom got the bend scuba diving in Tonga and got area back to New Zealand. We were on our way to Australia, not New Zealand. We were like, no, it's too hard to get to New Zealand. But yeah, so today we're
Bummer, you ended up here instead of Australia.
yeah, a lot less deadly things. I met my wife, so it all works out. Yeah, so today we're gonna just talk about what we did when we were kids on sailboats and how we got through it. And I know that my years on the sailboat set me up to be as resilient and awesome as I am today, to float my bubble a little bit. So I don't know about you, Sav, but yeah. What are your thoughts on your
Yeah, well, our stories are pretty different because I didn't live on a boat. Okay, so let me
just tell your story. Just tell your story. What happened.
No, so our stories are fairly different because I didn't live on a boat with my family. We basically, I have a water baby for a father, and so we used to spend like half the year away camping and on the boat, and we would basically just whip off here and there, and like we did a lot of diving and a lot of just a lot of water sports. And I think that it's interesting you brought up that made you more resilient, because for me, I think it made me harder, and not in like an emotional way, but more in a way that I'm able to deal with like getting sand in me and getting salt on me, and like not having like a proper shower for a few days. Like, I remember growing up and we used to hang the solar showers out on the grass, and like if it was a cloudy day, you knew that you were in for a crap shower that night. And so, we'd do stuff like that, we'd hang them up. And I think like having a childhood where it was just so active, so outdoors, so focused on basically you like living in a family where you help each other out and you don't take like the grand things for granted, because for the most part you've got very minimal to work with. Like I didn't grow up like on an island or on a boat or anything, so I had a very privileged life growing up. However, what I mean by that is I'm not afraid of like getting dirty and like getting amongst it, and that's where I feel like having that sort of childhood really helped me out. And then I think that love of water being so ingrained in me led me to go work on super yachts. And so I spent time on like really expensive mega yachts and sailboats, and I did that for a couple years, and that was a very different lifestyle to the one I imagine you had with your family on your own boat.
I grew up, so I had kind of a similar childhood as you before we went on the boat, because we had a houseboat. We had a lake 15 minutes from our house, and we did have, as you said, like you could call it privilege. Like I didn't even realize how much my mom made until I was like an adult. And she told me, and I was like, seriously? I didn't think that. Because if I wanted something, I had to work for it. I had an allowance and stuff like that. But we didn't have flashy stuff, but we had a houseboat on the boat, on the lake, and we had a speedboat and stuff. So I grew up around the water as well. I was wakeboarding by the time when wakeboarding first started. I was literally, a friend of ours had this thing that he was like, oh, it's a wakeboard. And we're like, how the fuck does that work? And it was like, okay, cool. We had a ski boat at the time. So like it kicked up, they ended up turning those ski boats into wakeboard boats and stuff like that. Like people doing crazy stuff with them, putting cages on them. And that was all the start of wakeboarding in the States. And so, yeah, I grew up with that as well. My dad used to paraglide. So we used to go travel around like Northern California paragliding. And my dad tells me about times where like he was in San Francisco paragliding and he actually stuffed me into his harness because it was safer than leaving me on the cliffside when I was like 5. So like you said, that resilience, and that's why I say that resilience, because I mean, yes, I'm a guy, so we kind of are more prone to like be happy to get dirty. But literally, I remember when I met my wife, I wore cargo pants, a singlet, or board shorts, and shoes was that was an option.
Sounds like you figured out the New Zealand uniform pretty quickly.
Before I even got here. But you talk about, and I'm sure you got this even working on super yachts, or even running around. I remember my parents, like, I did a lot of yacht racing. I don't know if you did you do much yacht racing at all?
No, just hobby.
Just hobby stuff.
Yeah.
But I got into the yacht racing scene because I wanted to learn more about sailing. I jumped into that, how do you sail, real quickly, and so I started doing yacht racing. I remember being in, where was I? St. Martin for the Heineken Regatta, which is like, you ask any, like, well, did you work? Where did you work on super yachts?
Mostly in the Mediterranean.
Did they go to the Caribbean at all?
No, I didn't.
So most of the time they come from the Med, and they come over to the Caribbean, and then they go back and they do that kind of back and forth type thing. And most people on super yachts know of Heineken Regatta, Antigua Race Week, the Classic Regatta, all those kind of things. And so we were at the Heineken Regatta, and we were there, and we had a friend of my mom's son or something was on board, and I was like, oh, how do I get onto one of these boats? And he's like, you go knock on the hull. I was like, you're serious? And he's like, yeah, that's how you get on. So I literally, the next morning, I think it was like day 2 or 3 of a week of racing, I went and I knocked on every single boat, and the very last boat that I knocked on, which was a 100-foot schooner. And this is where I learned a little bit of this, even with marketing. We were talking about marketing and stuff, even, which I think we might end up. But my dad was like, give them value. This is where I first learned to give value so that you can get what you want, in a way. And he's like, here's the digital camera. It was one of those fucking big ass block ones that, when they first came out. he's like, with the SD chip that was the size of your head. And he's like, here's the camera. Tell them you'll take photos for them for the day, and you'll give them to them at the end of the day.
Mm.
And so I was like, okay, cool. And so I did that, and I literally I raced on this 120-foot, 100-ton schooner for 4 days. I raced on it. And I learned about it. They had power winches and all. Literally, it was probably the slowest boat out of every boat that was racing, except for one, which is the one that they wanted to be. And so that was my first experience with yacht racing. But it gave me that can-do attitude as well. That if you want something, just go grab it.
It takes a lot of confidence and a lot of courage. Which often isn't present. You often have to fake it in order to go dock walking, and that's what we call it in the industry. Is you have to go dock walking, and that's how you get experience, especially because the yachting world has exploded. My father did it for a few years back when I was a child, and I think back then it wasn't as, like, I think travel was just slightly less accessible than it is now, and then obviously the industry just exploded, and it's been difficult for some people to get jobs, and there's been seasons where people have gone and actually not been able to get a job because it's just been flooded with people. But that dock walking and that confidence to just walk up to someone and try and, it's the classic sales story of sell me this pen, but you're the pen.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of balls.
It takes a lot of balls. It takes a lot of resilience as well, because out of the 100 no's that you're going to get, you'll get one yes. It's pretty much, especially if there's anybody listening that is wanting to go work on super yachts and stuff, it's actually, it can take a lot to go do it. I just interviewed a lady who was a chef on a super yacht, so she still does it over in the Med. She's in Spain at the moment doing, like, she runs a business she's a business coach as well. But I remember, because of the Heineken Regatta, I did the Heineken Regatta, and then I went to Antigua, which had Antigua Classic Regatta and then Antigua Race Week. And those are some of the biggest regattas in, like, the Caribbean. Like, there's nothing really much bigger than Antigua Race Week and the Heineken Regatta. But I remember going, and I was on Classic, and the J boat today, like the big J sail. Yeah. So Valshita and Endeavor were both there. And they're like at the time that they didn't have, all the other ones hadn't fully been built or anything, and they weren't all there, but those two were there. And I remember walking up to Valshita, And I talked to this. I was like, "Hey, is a skipper around?" And they go, "Yep." And so comes over and he's like, "What the fuck does this 14-year-old want?" Because I was 14.
Young.
I was
Okay.
14 at the time.
Wow.
So I'm 14 at the time. Just got into sailing. First year on the boat. Literally, we've been sailing for maybe 3 months. I knew fucking nothing.
Yeah.
But I was fake it till you make it. And it was like, he's like, "Oh, have you raced on any other boats?" I was like, "Yeah, I raced on 120-foot schooner in Heineken Regatta. am sailing on this boat. I've got a camera. I'm happy to take photos and stuff like that." He's like, "Look, man." He's like, "If the owner wasn't on board, I'd take you on board right now." He's like, "Yeah, I'd be totally happy to." I was like, "You're joking, right?" He's like, I was like a J boat, and then I ended up getting onto another little classic boat, which we won our class. And then when
Sorry. Okay, it didn't come.
wasn't gonna sneeze. And then so the resilience there, like I literally went and it was like 5 a.m. because again I had that 14-year-old, oh, can I actually do this? Can I not? And my mom was like, "Get on the dock and go walk." And I was like, "Okay." And so I went and I literally just started, and I was like, "Oh, these big boats, they're not gonna want me on board or anything like that." And they're like, "Not." And I was tall, so I wasn't. I mean, by then I was probably 5'10" at 14, almost 6 foot. So I wasn't a small human either. So I could do stuff, and I loved the deck. I loved being up on the foredeck for racing and stuff like that, pulling sails in and even grinding. But yeah, so I walked the dog, went to all these big, massive, multi-million-dollar yachts that are known to win and stuff, and I kept getting no's, and then I was like, "Okay, cool," just kept going. And so then I ended up getting on this little boat that literally the guy had stripped the thing inside out for so he could win. He wasn't really supposed to. and then yeah, and it was just fun. Like it was literally like as we were coming around the last buoy, it was like fucking beers, like everybody had beers out, and like it was like I wasn't because I was only 14, but it was. And then the race week, I ended up getting onto like a real well-known boat. I can't remember the name of it, but the guy, we won by a long shot our class, and that just started the whole racing thing. Then when we were in different islands, I'd race our catamaran, and my dad would be like, "Just don't crash it, please."
Your parents, your mom, first of all, I think that that's a really good sign of parenting. I try not to comment on parenting given that I'm not a parent, but I think that your mom's attitude of just get out there and do it
Yeah.
is a really good role model and a really good
Well, it was both my parents. Both my
piece of
parents were like, "What are you gonna? What's the worst?" Literally, they said to me in the first time was, "What's the worst that's gonna happen?"
yeah.
Like they're gonna say no. I was like, and they're like, "And you walk to the next boat." And that got me onto, I started working on super yachts. I did work a little bit on super yachts for a little while. I have a 60-foot Swan at one stage when I first met my wife, and that's literally the same thing. And now it's like like if we go into the marketing side of stuff, it's so the resilience is still there. It's like, what's the worst that somebody's gonna say? No.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something that I think has really helped my life immensely, and it's what Tim Ferriss calls the what is it, fear set. He calls it fear setting. So he has this system called fear setting, and it just speaks to me on such a deep level because it plays on this idea of what's the worst that can happen. So basically, we're all about goal setting, but at what point do we sit back and go, well, if I try this thing, what is the worst that could happen? Right. So the way he systemizes this process of getting somewhere is you write down the thing that you want, so your goal, and
Mm-hmm.
then you think the worst case scenario, and then what will happen if that worst case scenario comes to life, and how likely is it that that worst case scenario will even eventuate? And I've been in situations where, yeah, it's like fear holds us back so much. But when I think about the worst case scenario, often it's not that bad. Case in point, the end of my yachting career. My yachting career ended in a hospital bed in Barcelona. I decided that I had, yeah, had enough, and it was time for me to move on and go back to my roots of health and wellness and really focus on that. And so I'm in this hospital bed in Barcelona next to a woman who speaks Catalan. She doesn't even speak Spanish. So we're speaking broken, I speak French. So we're speaking in this broken English, French, Catalan quasi mix with a lot of hand signals and gestures. And I'm sitting there going, this isn't the travel life that I had pictured. I think it's time for me to move on. But how am I going to get home? I'm like down to my last few euros because I now no longer have a job. I'm in hospital. I don't really want to go back to living with my mom or my parents or family. Like, I'm a grown ass woman. Who wants to do that? That's moving backwards. So I'm sitting there and I'm going, wait a minute. That's the worst case scenario. Like, you have a loving family to go back to. You have enough money to buy a plane ticket. And do you know what's amazing is I just made that decision. And in my hospital bed, as I was recovering, I went, right, I'm flying out. I got discharged. I flew out 2 days later and I got upgraded to business class on the way home, which is amazing if you've ever done a European to New Zealand flight. Like, I was flying from France. I ended up going back to Nice and then flying out of there. And that's the longest flight in the world. That goes via Dubai, and it's a good, like, one stretch.
I've done to Italy, and it's a long way. Like,
it's huge. It's so long. And so business class was, and I just felt like I was being basically rewarded for taking that, like, gutsy decision of just going on a whim. But the thing was, I was trying so hard to make this one thing work because I was afraid that I'd end up, I don't know, things just wouldn't work out for me. But then when I figured out the worst case scenario, I was like, that's actually pretty good. Like, by standards, my worst case scenario of going back to a loving family, I could probably get like a job the day I land. You know, I was fine. Like, I was actually protected because I'd done a lot of work in the past. I had connections. I had, you know, I was like living a privileged life. And so I flew back, and yeah, the worst case scenario absolutely did happen. I had to live with family for like 2 weeks, and it took me 2 weeks to then find a flat and get a job, and I was fine.
Most things work out, don't they?
Yeah, because worst case scenario is often not as bad as you think it's going to be.
No.
You know, and especially when it comes to selling yourself, if someone's going to say no, well, then so what? You didn't have the job at all. You didn't have the date. You didn't have the opportunity. Like, if you go for it and you don't get it, you still haven't lost anything.
You've actually gained something because you learned.
100%. 100%.
I'm intrigued. Why were you in hospital?
I got a kidney infection.
It's always, yeah.
But I thought I was dying. Like, if you've ever had a kidney infection, that shit is painful.
No, haven't been there. Haven't done that. But you think about the resilience in that. You think about, you were sitting there next to a lady that didn't speak a word of English, and yet you still made a conversation. I remember I got all that from the boat as well. I mean, we were in places where you didn't, Panama. People they speak Spanish. That's it. French Polynesia. That's all they speak is French. Like, and there's people that do not speak a word. And I remember another story. I was hanging around with the French Polynesia junior surf champ in Tahiti, and some of his friends spoke no English. I was going out with them, going surfing. And I remember being out surfing with these kids that spoke no English. I'm the white guy. Normally you'd be kicked off the fucking waves. They'd be like, and I'm on a bodyboard, not even a surfboard. And they'd be like, but they're sitting there because I'm friends with him as well, but also because I'm like sitting there chatty with them and, resilient to the whole, they don't speak English, so why the fuck bother? I'm sitting there chatting with them on the waves, and they're sitting there going, Chris, get the wave, and giving me these amazing waves in Tahiti to bodyboard. And I'm like, it just shows how being compassionate with people and being, open to talking with people and being that resilient, not letting that fear of, but I don't speak their language, or, that fear of the no, or the fear of, the fuck off or something like that. what's the worst that's going to happen?
Mm. Yeah, but you also, if you put yourself out there, then you're pretty much, like I use the word rewarded. You
Yeah.
you you get good things because you're radiating like a positive field of energy that is a magnet for people. So even if people have no idea what you're saying, they're open to communication still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, and you know, I live on the thing of everything happens for us. So
Mm.
even that no is happening for you, so you can be set up for the next yes.
Rejection is redirection.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. So how do you think, tell us a little bit more about your sailing, because obviously I take it, was it a trailer boat or was it like moored boat, or what kind of boat was it?
So it was an 85-meter mega yacht. That was
Oh,
my
it's the one that you worked on, or
I
your
worked
parents?
on a few. I worked on a few that were all around that size, but I spent a good season on that boat.
But
And
what
then
about
I
your
worked
parents
on,
when you were
hey?
a kid? What about your parents when you were a kid?
Oh, those, like we just had like little fizz boats and launches, and then I had a friend who actually sailed around the world on a catamaran as well. And so I spent a week with them, and we went up the coast of, we went from Auckland up to Mangawai. So for anyone that isn't familiar with New Zealand, that's a good, it took us, I think, like a couple days. We went via a couple islands, and we just cruised our way up to Mangawai, which was amazing. Um, and yeah, I just spent a lot of time on the water as a kid. So like I
Mm.
say, my story is very different to yours. I didn't live on a boat um, with my family, but we spent a lot of time on our boats.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But yeah, okay. So tell us about the super yacht times. I want to hear these. I want to hear these stories because I've heard so many different super yacht stories, and that I want to hear yours.
So it's interesting because we're talking about dock walking and saying no. And I have to say, I've been very privileged to actually never have that experience. I got a really lucky break. So it's very uncommon if you're wanting to break into the super yachting industry, it's very uncommon to get your first job um, by not dock walking or not networking. I basically was joined to a few Facebook groups by a girlfriend who's in the industry, and I replied to a bunch of posts prior to the season starting, and they were looking for stews. And I, like I said, I got a lucky break. One lady reached out to me and she interviewed me, and then she gave me the job while I was still in New Zealand. And they flew me from New Zealand over to Italy. I was in Imperia, which is in the south. And yeah, I got my first job straight away working on a charter boat. So I remember we cracked into the season very, very quickly. A charter boat, basically, for anyone who isn't familiar with that term, you get private and you get charter. Often they can be both, but a private boat is owned by the owners and the owners only use it. A charter boat basically gets commissioned out to guests and anyone that wants to holiday on their boat for a price. And you often get tips when you work on a charter boat. So people trying to make money really gravitate towards those. So we were on a charter, and I had flown in 24 hours before. We cracked on, we were straight into it. And I was in I was in the galley with my chief stew who had given me the job. And I actually asked her, I said, hey, look, I'm so confused. Why me? Why did you give me this job? You didn't know me. And I was green. I am green. And I was still in New Zealand. And she told me that she had planned to leave after that season. And she was leaving the industry. She'd been in it for years with her partner. And they're South African. They were planning to move to New Zealand because her husband, who was also working on the boat at the time, he'd followed her into the industry to support her. And they were doing it together, which was awesome. And then they wanted to move to New Zealand so they could go back to working in vineyards, which was his passion. And so they do. They live in Nelson now, here, which is amazing. But she told me, yeah, I'm leaving the industry. When I joined, I got a lucky break, and you are my way of giving back to the industry.
That's
I wanted
awesome.
to pass it on. It was a very like karmic blessing, and I was so surprised, I think, by her answer, but also just so grateful because there have been people who have rocked up to Europe with with optimistic with an optimistic outlook, and this like gung-ho attitude, which is what you need, and they still haven't gotten the job, and they've had to go home, come back and try again, or go over to the Caribbean and try that season.
Yeah.
And so I felt very, 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 very grateful that she gave me that opportunity. And that's how I got into that. And so that was a beautiful big charter boat in Italy. And then I moved on to a private boat, the 85-meter. And then I worked on various charters and little like day work bits. And then I got into a sailboat. And then that's when I got my kidney infection and wound up in
Which sailboat was that?
I can't remember the name of it. It was gorgeous though. There's a huge difference between sail yachts and motor yachts.
Oh yeah.
Very, very, very big difference, both in terms of obviously how they run, but with the crew and often the people who own them and charter them. People wanting sail yachts often love sailing. People who go for motor yachts love holidaying. There's a very, very big difference.
Normally those motor yachts don't always make it over to the Caribbean either. It's more the sailboats that make it to the Caribbean.
Oh no, a lot of motor yachts.
Well, they do, but even in the Med, like I don't know, when I was in the Med, there was still a lot of them that just didn't. Because they were just a holiday place and they didn't want to go to the Caribbean. But yeah, no, a lot of them still do go over. But yeah, like we even at the regattas, you go to the regattas and it's like 99%. When I was in the Caribbean, it's not. Well, this is back 20 years ago. So
yeah, but also motor yachts don't race, so that's a huge like difference there too.
Exactly. All right. Cool. I like that. So, but if you think back to just posting and commenting on things on those groups, you're still in a way walking the dogs because you're putting yourself out there.
Totally. And I had no idea what I was doing because I was so green.
Yeah. The other advice that I have for people with that kind of stuff is if you're going for a certain thing, like New Zealand's a great place, actually. If anybody listening is in New Zealand that wants to go and work on super yachts, New Zealand's like, not right now, but New Zealand's a great place because you can go down to Orams, you can go down and you can just start literally giving your time away for free. Go work. And that's how I ended up getting on one boat, and I got a friend onto another boat. And literally we just went down when we were doing our skipper's ticket. We went down and we just started doing, when we had free time, we just started helping work on boats.
Yeah.
And we're like, what's to do? What can we help with? How can we help?
Yeah, well, you have to get experience somehow. I think that yachting is a very like black and white example of that. But with anything, you have to really be open to giving more value and open to trying to sell yourself and open to owning the skill set that you have, but also owning your ability to learn. And I think that's where I really put myself in a good position with my now friend Bianca, who gave me that job, because I said to her, I am green, I'm looking for my first gig. And fortunately, that's what she was looking for, because she was looking to train someone and mold that person into all the good things she'd picked up. But it's that ability to mold, it's that versatility, it's that just flexibility and openness and willingness to learn that gets you anywhere, because we all need to remember that we start somewhere, and that somewhere is at the bottom of the heap with zero experience and often not the skill set that's needed to do the job or get the thing done. But it's the willingness to learn, and it's the humbleness to understand a hierarchy and really put yourself in a position to just mirror and absorb like a sponge that gets you eventually to a place where hopefully you can start to give back and teach others.
I think also it doesn't matter really what level you're at. Having that humbleness is so important. Like you could be the CEO of a company, you don't know everything. No. And understanding, like I learned this from my days yachting and sailing. Is my parents. I was like, these guys are doing it this way. I don't like how they're doing it. They're blah blah. This or that thing. As a teenager thinking that fucking everything. I remember my parents going, Chris, take what you think is going to be useful. Don't forget the rest, but take what you think is useful. Learn on it, but don't disregard or think that you know everything, because you don't. you've been sailing for a year. um, but learn from these guys and take the experiences that you feel are good, that you feel that you resonate with, learn them really well, and the other ones, acknowledge them and go, okay, cool, I understand that.
Yeah.
But don't sit there and think that they're crap, because that's the way that that person has learned to do it, and they could actually be a better way than you know how. And
And
so,
there's a million ways that you can do things. And that's where I really appreciated what Bianca said, in that, you know, in a lot of chief stews, so that's the position of in the hierarchy in yachting. A chief stew is basically your lead girl or man. You could have a steward. And they basically, there does come a time where you like having someone green, you like having someone who is totally fresh, because you can teach them and mold them in the way that you really feel is best, in the way that you perhaps were taught or weren't taught.
yeah.
And that I think is the beautiful cycle of life, you know.
I guess it's similar. It's very similar to, like kind of what we do. We coach people to not go through and have to fumble through it for 10 years and figure it out on their own. We mold them, we give them the tools, just like she did with you, gives you the tools that she's found works best, so you could be in her, pretty much not be her at the beginning in a way, and then you could learn new stuff over the next 10 years and then be able to that kind of, which is, people, if you think of it that way, it's like that's amazing. And if you're that person that's at the bottom, think of it that way. Find the people that have been doing stuff for a long period of time and go, like, not just sailing, but in anything. Find the people that have been doing stuff for a while and know what they're talking about and are the experts as such in their field, and go pick their brain. Go reach out.
100%. Yeah, it's important. Often the thing that you want to do, someone's already done it. So
Oh,
go and find that person and copy them, and then do it better, because
yeah,
they've done a lot of the hard work for you. You've
yeah,
seen it's possible, so you're open to actually being able to do it. You're more likely to be successful too when you've seen someone that's already done the thing you want to do. That's the whole magic of the 4-minute mile. They didn't think it could be done until someone ran a 4-minute mile. And
one of
now so many people run 4-minute miles, because that is possible and you believe it to be possible. So I 100% agree with finding someone who's in the position you want to be in,
and
and
model.
just learn and sponge off them.
Yeah, research them, model them, do whatever it is, think, yeah, and then throw your twist on it
Yeah.
so that it's yours. And that's, it's so important, like, and that's why we learn, that's why we, and that's why, like, my other podcast, and I'm sure your other one, that's why I started it, because I wanted to learn from people on burnout. That's why I've started it, and that's why we started this, so we can sit there and learn from each other, and eventually we'll have other people on here as well and learn from them. And yeah, it's so that you can learn more, so you can then do more and give more.
Yeah, give more is so important. Yeah, you definitely need to fill up your toolbox and then like share those tools.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
and that's absolutely what we do. And I don't claim to be the best at what I do, but I know something, and I think that everyone has something that they can teach you. And if you're receptive to it, then you'll go so far.
Yeah, it's interesting how we both have, they are different stories, but so many common things out of them.
Mm.
You know, there's so many common traits and stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, I in the beginning when we were talking, the whole like getting dirty thing. I'm like, if I didn't have the experience that I did, I wouldn't be happy having grease up to my elbows, sometimes all the way onto my back. I'm working on stuff, and then walking inside and be like, oh, I can't touch anything now. Because it's just, it builds that resilience. And if you don't have to have done yachting, you don't have to have been out camping all the time. You can look at your childhood, and it has created who you are today. All the good, all the bad has created who you are today. So you should be happy with all of it. Like, whatever's happened when you were a kid is created this amazing person that you are today.
Yeah, yeah, and the potential.
Mm, yeah. Well, I think we've covered everything, haven't we, today?
I think so.
Okay, awesome. Well, again, thanks everybody for for listening and for being on the show. Listening onto it, watching it. Remember to make sure that you guys like, subscribe, review. We really want to hear what you guys think, as well as leave us comments if there's topics you want us to talk about. Or I think we're getting to the stage where we need to get somebody else on here. So if there's somebody that listeners believe that we should reach out to and talk to and have a power chat with, let us know, because we're always interested in hearing what you guys think, because you guys are the listeners, you guys are the audience. So again, thanks very much, and till next time, we shall talk to you soon.
Ciao.